Orlando Woolridge was already a star for the Chicago Bulls when Michael Jordan arrived. He was scoring over 20 points per game, but soon his name was completely overshadowed by the future NBA legend. He played alongside Jordan, Magic Johnson, and James Worthy, played 13 seasons in the NBA, and still ended up almost forgotten. But the worst was yet to come. At age 52, his story was cut far too short. Why did a player of this caliber fade from NBA memory? And what actually happened to the man who was once one of the Bulls' main stars? If, like me, you enjoy looking back at the great NBA legends of past decades, and you're interested in their true stories and little-known facts that are rarely talked about, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps the channel grow and makes it possible to bring you more videos like this. Thank you. Now, let's continue. Today, Orlando Woolridge's name is almost impossible to picture apart from the history of the Chicago Bulls. But that is precisely the main paradox of his career. When a young Michael Jordan appeared in Chicago in the mid-80s, Woolridge was already one of the team's primary players and the man its offense largely relied upon. In the 1984-85 season, he averaged 22.9 points per game, and a year later, when Jordan missed a significant portion of the season due to a severe injury, Woolridge once again found himself in the spotlight, finishing the regular season with 20.7 points per game. For the Chicago Bulls, he was neither a secondary basketball player nor an accidental partner to the future legend. He had already proven capable of generating results on his own and carrying a massive offensive load. Yet today, when those years are remembered, a completely different name is usually mentioned. Jordan became the face of a new NBA era, the symbol of the Chicago Bulls, and one of the most recognizable athletes in sports history. Meanwhile, Orlando Woolridge gradually ended up in the background of that incredible story. His photographs can be found in archives, his statistics preserved in official databases, and his matches remain part of the league's history. But for millions of basketball fans, his name has nearly vanished from memory. And a natural question arises. How did a player who, even before Jordan's full takeoff, was one of the Bulls' primary scorers, end up so completely overshadowed by the man who joined the team later? The answer cannot be found in numbers alone. Woolridge's story is far more interesting. He possessed the exact set of qualities that, in the 80s, made spectators jump out of their seats. Standing around 2 meters tall, with a powerful physique, incredible leaping ability, and the ability to attack the rim as if defenders weren't even there, Woolridge was one of those players whose game looked especially great in the era of fast-paced basketball, when a powerful drive and a spectacular dunk could turn the mood of the entire arena in a matter of seconds. Yet his career took a completely different path than anyone could have imagined at the start. Because before the Chicago Bulls, before Jordan, and before the massive NBA arenas, there was another Orlando Woolridge, a young basketball player from Louisiana who still had to prove that his unusual physical traits could turn into true basketball mastery. And it was there, long before his first games in a Bulls uniform, that the first signs began to appear that the coaches had a player with a very special potential on their hands. The story of Orlando Woolridge began in Louisiana, where basketball gradually became not just a hobby for him, but his main chance to make a name for himself. Even in his youth, it was noticeable that his physical capabilities differed from most of his peers. Height, strength, and especially explosive leaping ability gave him a huge advantage. But athleticism alone wasn't enough for a major career. Woolridge had to prove he could turn his natural gifts into a stable game at a high level. The next important step happened at Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish University team was regularly in the spotlight of American collegiate basketball in those years, and Woolridge quickly became one of its key players. For the young forward, this was an opportunity to step onto the national stage and prove himself against the country's strongest college teams. He spent 4 seasons with Notre Dame and the team reached the NCAA tournament in every single one of them. That, in itself, spoke volumes about the seriousness of the program. But for Woolridge, the true test came in matches where literally everything was on the line. In 1978, Notre Dame reached the Final Four. Woolridge was part of a team that managed to fight through several grueling rounds and land among the 4 strongest college squads in the country. For a young player, an experience like that meant everything. He grew accustomed to the pressure of big games, heightened attention, and the necessity of making decisions when a single mistake could end the season. But Woolridge made his loudest statement closer to the end of his college career. In 1981, Notre Dame faced Virginia, which was ranked #1 in the national rankings. Virginia featured Ralph Sampson at the time, one of the country's most famous young basketball players and a future NBA star. It seemed the favorite should control the game, yet Notre Dame managed to pull off an upset. In the final seconds of the match, it was Woolridge who got the opportunity to seal it. His shot secured a 66-64 victory for Notre Dame, and instantly turned that moment into one of the most memorable highlights of his college career. Now he was known far beyond the campus. His performances caught the attention of NBA scouts, and among those who noticed Woolridge's talent was Willis Reed. The former New York Knicks star already held immense authority in professional basketball and recommended the young forward to the Chicago Bulls management. For Woolridge, this meant stepping up to an entirely different level. Ahead lay the 1981 draft, where young basketball players first learned which franchise was willing to place its bet on them. Woolridge was no longer just a promising college player. Now, he was being evaluated by professional scouts, coaches, and NBA executives, and the cost of every mistake became much higher. The Chicago Bulls ultimately selected him with the 6th overall pick in the first round. Thus, the young forward from Louisiana got his first real shot in the big league. And at that moment, no one could possibly know how unusual his subsequent journey would turn out to be. Because just a few years later, this athletic rookie would become one of the Chicago Bulls' main players, only to end up standing next to the man who would completely change the history of the franchise. The 6th pick of the first round immediately showed that the Chicago Bulls did not view Orlando Woolridge as an ordinary role player. Expectations were high that he would eventually become an important part of the team and grow into a serious offensive force. But the transition from college basketball to the NBA is rarely easy. The game's speed increased, defenders grew stronger, and every weakness of a young basketball player was now exposed at the highest level. Woolridge, however, proved fairly quickly that his selection was no accident. His main weapons remained speed, physical strength, and the ability to aggressively attack the basket. He posed a serious problem for defenders. If Orlando found any space, stopping his drive to the rim was exceptionally difficult. At the start of his career, he still had to find his place in the lineup and adapt to the demands of professional basketball. But gradually, his role became more prominent. Woolridge received the ball on offense more often and used his strengths with increasing confidence. He became especially dangerous in situations where he could accelerate and attack on the move. His game combined qualities rarely found in a forward of his size. He could finish drives with powerful dunks, moved quickly enough for his height, and possessed the necessary confidence to take responsibility on offense. The Chicago Bulls at that time were not yet the team recognized by most fans today. Many years remained before their championship era. The club was searching for its direction and desperately needed players capable of creating offense on their own. Woolridge gradually became just such a basketball player. His scoring rose, and with it, his influence on the Bulls' game grew. He no longer looked like a mere rookie given a chance to prove himself. Now, concrete results were expected of him. During the 1983-84 season, Woolridge averaged 17.7 points per game. A year later, That figure jumped sharply to 22.9. It was then that everyone finally understood Chicago had acquired a player capable of being one of the team's primary offensive options. Furthermore, this happened during a period when the Bulls still lacked the system and star power that would emerge later. Woolridge had to shoulder a significant portion of the offensive workload, and he responded with high production. Then came the 1985-86 season, which was supposed to be even more crucial for his career. The Chicago Bulls drafted young Michael Jordan, generating immense anticipation around the rookie. But initially, it was Woolridge who remained one of the key figures driving the team's offense. And then an event occurred that could have completely ruined the Bulls' plans for the season. Jordan suffered a severe foot injury and was sidelined for a long time. The team suddenly lost its most promising newcomer, and the burden on the remaining leaders increased sharply. For Woolridge, this was a moment to cement his status as the primary offensive star of Chicago once and for all. And it was during this period that he showed just how far he had already moved past that sixth draft pick, who, a few years prior, was just getting used to the NBA. The 1985-86 season turned out to be one of the most unusual in Orlando Woolridge's career. The Chicago Bulls lost Michael Jordan to injury, and the team now required a player who could shoulder a massive share of the offensive load. Woolridge stepped up to fill that huge void. He answered with his play. Throughout the season, Woolridge consistently scored points, attacked the rim, and increasingly became the Bulls' main option in the attack. His scoring average reached 20.7 points per game, and his style of play made him one of the team's most spectacular performers. Woolridge was especially dangerous on drives. He didn't just settle for outside shots. He constantly forced the defense to react to his movement toward the basket. If a defender backed off too much, Orlando could take the shot. If they tried to meet him closer to the perimeter, Woolridge used his speed and drove past them. For the spectators, this looked spectacular. But for opponents, it created a severe problem. Stopping him in just one way was virtually impossible, and all of this happened within a team that continued to await Jordan's return. When the young guard returned to the Bulls lineup after a lengthy recovery, the situation began to shift gradually. Now, Woolridge was playing alongside a man destined to become the center of the entire franchise. But at that moment, no one could yet know how quickly the distribution of roles would change. Jordan returned to the court with an immense desire to prove the injury hadn't broken his career. Meanwhile, Woolridge already held the status of one of the team's most productive scorers. Consequently, an unusual dynamic began to brew inside the Bulls. Two talented offensive players had to find a way to coexist effectively in the same lineup. It was a crucial moment for both. For Jordan, an opportunity to gradually regain his previous form and prove he could lead the team. For Woolridge, the necessity of figuring out how to retain his own value within a lineup where attention was increasingly concentrating around the younger player. Yet it wasn't just about statistics. Jordan possessed a rare ability to turn every game into an event. His popularity skyrocketed, accompanied by a surge in media and fan attention. Every Bulls match was increasingly viewed through the lens of the future great player's development. Woolridge kept doing his job, but the center of gravity gradually shifted. In the 1986-87 season, he remained an important part of the team and continued to put up points. However, it became increasingly obvious that the Chicago Bulls were building their future around Jordan. And for Woolridge, this was the moment to make a tough choice. He could try to preserve his previous role within the team, even as his space gradually shrank, or he could look for a place where his talent would once again take center stage. Ultimately, Orlando's next path did not involve competing with Jordan for the status of the main star. He chose a different route. After several seasons in Chicago, Woolridge left the Bulls, walking away just as the franchise's true transformation was beginning. The irony was that he wasn't leaving a failing team, but a club destined to soon become one of the most famous organizations in sports history. And for Woolridge himself, the next step proved completely unexpected. He headed off to where another basketball empire already existed, one that also revolved around an entire NBA era. In 1988, Orlando Woolridge landed with the Los Angeles Lakers, presenting an entirely new challenge for his career. If in Chicago he had gradually been pushed into the shadow of a rising star, now he had to play for a team that already possessed an established system and multiple recognized leaders. The Lakers of that era were one of the most powerful teams in the NBA. The roster featured Magic Johnson and James Worthy, and Pat Riley coached the squad. This was a team that didn't just compete for high standings, but was accustomed to playing with championship expectations. For Woolridge, this meant a significant change. In Chicago, he was expected to create offense and regularly take the initiative. In Los Angeles, he needed to integrate into an already functioning machine and use his strengths wherever they proved most useful. At the same time, his talent hadn't gone anywhere. Woolridge remained an exceptionally efficient offensive player. In the 1988-89 season, he averaged 14.0 points per game, and a year later, he posted even more interesting numbers. During the 1989-90 season, his scoring average was 12.7 points per game, while shooting 55.6% from the field. These figures clearly illustrate how much his role had changed. Now, Woolridge was no longer required to constantly generate offense on his own. Surrounded by players capable of organizing the attack, he could focus on the specific moments where his physical strength and ability to finish plays brought maximum benefit. Yet, this situation had a flip side as well. When a team is packed with stars, even a very good player can gradually get lost among the rest. Magic Johnson was one of the premier playmakers in the entire league. James Worthy represented yet another massive scoring threat. In such a system, Woolridge could no longer count on the volume of attention and touches he received during his best years in Chicago. Still, his stint with the Lakers demonstrated an important truth. Woolridge could be valuable not just as the primary offensive option. He knew how to adapt and remain effective even when the team's structure shifted around him. Yet it was precisely here that his career began to enter a new phase. The peak of his individual fame was behind him. Now he had to find his place among teams with different leaders and different goals. And the further his career progressed, the more frequently his value was defined not by flashy headlines, but by concrete work on the court. After Los Angeles, another opportunity opened up for Woolridge. He moved to Denver, where the situation was entirely different. Here, he was once again asked to provide more offensive activity, offering a chance to remind the entire league that beyond big teams and loud names, the exact same Orlando Woolridge, once the primary scorer of the Chicago Bulls, was still out there. Yet, recapturing the past proved far harder than simply switching to a new team. The next few seasons would show how rapidly the career of a player who, until recently, was considered a premier offensive force can change. Following his departure from Chicago, Woolridge didn't immediately end up in Los Angeles. First came a brief stint with the New Jersey Nets, which served as a transitional phase in his career. After several seasons as a key offensive figure for the Bulls, he had to prove his worth all over again on a different squad. Then came the Los Angeles Lakers. Within that organization, Woolridge could no longer expect his former role as the first or second scoring option. With Magic Johnson and James Worthy nearby and a team built around championship ambitions, Woolridge had to become part of a pre-existing system. He remained efficient. In the 1989-90 season, he averaged 12.7 points per game and shot 55.6% from the field. But his task was no longer to constantly create offense on his own, but rather to apply his strengths within a team where the starring roles were already taken. And it was here that the magnitude of his career's shift became particularly striking. Not long ago, Woolridge was one of the Bulls' top scorers, but now his value was defined not by star status, but by his ability to contribute in a specific supporting role. Shortly after his time with the Lakers, Orlando Woolridge got another chance to return to a primary scoring role. With the Denver Nuggets, much more was expected of him, and he seized that opportunity. The 1990-91 season became one of the final bright sparks of his career. Woolridge averaged around 25 points per game and found himself back in the spotlight as a prolific forward. However, Denver was far from the caliber of those great teams Orlando had played for previously. This created a strange contrast. Wherever Woolridge was asked to score heavily, he could put up impressive statistics. But whenever he landed on a strong roster featuring multiple stars, his role inevitably shrank. Following Denver, his journey continued with the Detroit Pistons, and the circumstances there were completely different. The Pistons were reigning champions, known primarily for tough defense, discipline, and team-first play. Woolridge was stepping into a system where individual scoring could no longer serve as his primary argument. He had to prove he could benefit a team accustomed to winning through entirely different means. In Detroit, Woolridge found himself in a collective that already possessed its own distinct identity and established leaders. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, and Dennis Rodman were all there. Against such names, even an experienced scorer could easily fade into the background. Nevertheless, Woolridge received playing time and was expected to help the offense. During the 1991-92 season, he played 50 games for the Pistons before his career moved further toward its conclusion. Stints with the Milwaukee Bucks and Philadelphia 76ers followed. On these teams, Woolridge was no longer the player who used to score upwards of 20 points a game in Chicago or Denver. Yet he remained a professional, capable of providing a team with points and veteran experience. Woolridge's final NBA season came in 1993-94 with Philadelphia. At age 34, he played 74 games and averaged 12.7 points per contest. With that, his NBA story essentially came to a close. But basketball itself was far from over for him. After Philadelphia, Woolridge didn't immediately say goodbye to professional basketball. He traveled to Italy to continue his career in European basketball. During the 1994-95 season, he played for Benetton Treviso, followed by a stint with Buckler Bologna. For many American fans, this was the moment when Woolridge's name finally vanished from their familiar information sphere. Yet he was still stepping onto the court. His career continued far away from the NBA, major American arenas, and constant press attention. It was a natural phase for a veteran who had spent 13 seasons in the world's premier basketball league. In total, Woolridge played 851 NBA games and averaged 16.0 points per game. He concluded his professional playing career in 1996. The most interesting part, however, was that his connection to basketball did not sever after he hung up his sneakers. Orlando still had a completely different role waiting for him. When his playing days were behind him, Woolridge continued working in basketball as a coach. In the late 90s, he headed the Los Angeles Sparks in the WNBA. For a man who had recently been playing himself, this was a completely new experience. Now, instead of creating moments through his own drives and dunks, he had to manage other players, make decisions from the sideline, and take responsibility for the entire team's results. Later on, Woolridge returned to coaching again. He remained tied to basketball long after his playing days ended. Yet, as time went on, attention toward him steadily dwindled. To a new generation of fans, he was no longer an NBA star. To the older generation, his name was increasingly tied to memories of the era when the Chicago Bulls were just beginning their ascent to greatness. And then occurred the event that transformed Woolridge's story from a forgotten sports biography into the tragic tale of a man who left this world far too early. On May 31, 2012, Orlando Woolridge passed away. He was only 52 years old. He was in his native Louisiana at his parents' house in Mansfield. The final years of his life had been plagued by severe heart problems, and prior to that, he had been under medical observation. For a man who in his youth seemed the very embodiment of physical strength and athleticism, such an ending felt especially heavy. Woolridge lived a full athletic life. He journeyed from high school basketball in Louisiana to Notre Dame, became the 6th pick in the NBA draft, and spent 13 seasons in the professional league. He played alongside future legends, represented several famous clubs, continued his career in Europe, and later tried his hand at coaching. Yet, to the general public, his name gradually faded from memory. And it is precisely here that the main question of this entire story arises. How did a player with such a career end up nearly forgotten? Orlando Woolridge was not some accidental basketball player who merely happened to spend a few years in the NBA. He played 851 games and averaged 16 points per contest. In his prime, his scoring exceeded 20 points per game, and his physical gifts allowed him to be one of the most spectacular forwards of his era. Yet his career landed in an extremely awkward historical spot. He was one of the main offensive figures for the Chicago Bulls right before the franchise fully transitioned into the Michael Jordan era. Then he wound up alongside Magic Johnson and James Worthy on the Lakers. Later, he played for other teams that already had their own established leaders. He never achieved championship superstar status, nor became the defining symbol of his era. And after his retirement, his achievements gradually drifted outside of mass memory. The most tragic part lies elsewhere. Woolridge left this world at just 52 years old, never getting to witness how much attitudes toward the history of that generation would ultimately change. Today, his name is remembered far less than it deserves. But if you remove the shadows of Jordan, Magic Johnson, and other great players from this story, what remains is the independent career of a true NBA professional, a man who was once one of the most dangerous offensive players on the Chicago Bulls. And perhaps that is precisely why the story of Orlando Woolridge is worth recalling one more time. If you are interested in such forgotten and tragic stories of legendary NBA players, make sure to check out other videos on our channel. Links to them will appear on the screen at the end of this video.